Welcome back to Salute Your Sports Week 5. We got a fun show today. Plenty of football, NFL, and college. Some MLB awards. Really good statements of the week. Locks of the week. Kamenechev, Drew Brackett, Tom Castleman. Exciting show today, guys. What an exciting weekend of football. We had the old guard playing well. One guy, Drew Brees, played great. Tom Brady, not so much. And plenty of young quarterbacks put on a show. We're actually going to rank our top 5 young quarterbacks in the segment after this. But we're going to get started with the New Orleans Saints' demolition of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Was this win a big deal, or was it just, any other game?
I think this kind of fits in with the narrative we've seen out of the NFC all year, that it's kind of a lucky who's hot roulette of who's going well in the NFC right now. I think that this doesn't really do much to discredit the Buccaneers. I think they're still a strong contender. If anything, this just brings the Saints into the fold as yet another team that we have to look out for. Certainly, I still don't think any favorites, but something that I found on Twitter that was very interesting. According to DVOA, the Saints' win on Sunday night is the best played game this century. In 20 years,
DVOA, don't you?
that is the best played game. Yeah, to go back, let's see, it goes back as far as 1985. Only 4 games were better, and they were played in 89. Cleveland had the best game of all time. Washington in 91, Pittsburgh in 99, San Francisco in 93, and then New Orleans on Sunday night with the best played game this century, 5th best all time. So just like, I thought that was a really interesting stat. It shows how dominant the Saints were over such a quality Tampa team that just had an off night. So I thought that was just, a really interesting thing to throw out there.
Yeah, that's a really interesting stat, but you know me, I try not to overreact to one game from a team. The Saints obviously played well on Sunday night. Everything went their way. They held the Bucs to just 8 yards rushing, just 5 rushing attempts for Tampa Bay, and that included a kneel down at the end of the game. The Bucs ran just 43 offensive plays. Well, the Saints ran 72. So a great win for the Saints. As you mentioned, Tom, they played one of the best games of the century, but don't expect those numbers from them every game. So I'm not going to overreact to this one game.
Well, okay. First off, Tom, before I react and overreact, what year was the Browns? So this was the best, or the Browns was the best?
So the Browns in 1989 had a win of 51-0 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's considered by a DVOA, defensive value over average, the best game of all time. The Saints are the best of this century in the 2000s with their 38-3 win over Tampa. And from what I understand, that includes the quality of your opponent as well. So if you blow out, say, the 0-16 Lions, that's not going to have the same impact as a team such as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Right. Well, so I am going to overreact a little bit just because I think this is kind of a big deal, more so for Tampa Bay than New Orleans, because they say in sports, matchups are pretty important. And I think the matchups clearly show that the Saints, it's much like the Ravens can't beat the Chiefs. Well, the Saints can't beat, or the Buccaneers can't beat the Saints. 38-3, it was complete dominance. I think Tampa Bay had like the least rush attempts in NFL history because they got so far behind. 4 touchdown passes for Drew Brees. I think it was huge for New Orleans to get Michael Thomas back. They're getting Emmanuel Sanders in the fold. Taysom Hill was running all over the place. And I think the Buccaneers are a good blitz team. That's part of what their defense does so well. Well, the Saints throw the quick passes. They get rid of the ball real fast. And that really hurts the Tampa Bay defense, which we were talking about the Buccaneers winning because of their better defense. Well, their defense was terrible, and the Saints defense was amazing. And actually, that Saints defense had been underachieving this year. They had some hype going in. They gave up a lot of points. So I think it was a statement for them to win that game and win it so handedly. And I think it was kind of a statement for Drew Brees. He's 5-2 all time against Brady. Obviously, it's a team game. But I agree with Tom. He's been saying it all year on this show. any given week. You never know what's going to happen out of the NFC. However, I did want to ask you guys a question. First off, I think the Saints are this week's front runner. We'll see how long that
yeah,
lasts.
the front runner du jour.
But where do you guys rank Drew Brees on the all-time greatest quarterbacks? Because he is number one all-time in yards and touchdown passes, and he gets mentioned in the back sometimes. You hear Brady and Manning, you hear Rodgers, Montana. Rarely do you hear Drew Brees in the top 5 all-time, and I think he belongs personally.
I think context is very, very important in this conversation and in all kind of like greatness across eras conversation. I think it was either this past weekend or the weekend before. I think it was Joe Flacco passed Joe Montana for passing yards career. It was Monday. So Joe Flacco is not better than Joe Montana. So I think Drew Brees, using my eyes, looking at the full body of work for his career, I'd say he's probably a top 10 quarterback. But you can't discount guys like, you want to go way back to the 60s, Johnny Unitas, Fran Tarkenton. You can't discount the greatness that those guys had in those eras, even if the stats aren't necessarily there. Last year, the NFL, with the 100th year anniversary of the NFL, did their the top greatest players at each position. And Drew Brees didn't make the top 5 for them. And at first I thought, he's number 1 in yards. He could very well be number 1 in passing touchdowns. Like, how can he not be top 5? And there's just so many great quarterbacks across other eras. Somebody's got to miss the cut. And you look at the overall excellence of Manning and Brady. I think Brees is behind them, even if the numbers have him ahead. I think just in terms of, you can just tell. You just know. So the context is important. I'd say probably he's a top 10 quarterback. But yeah, top 5 I think is just a bit too lofty across the storied history of the NFL.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Tom. You mentioned the history, but I think in the last 20 years, Drew Brees is a top 3 quarterback behind Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Give credit to those 3 guys for all playing the quarterback position for 18 years or more. They were all reliable quarterbacks, all put up amazing numbers. I probably trust Brady the most with the game on the line, but Manning and Brees aren't far behind.
So I'm going to disagree with you guys here. I think, once again, Drew Brees gets the short end of the stick. Once again, we put him behind Brady and Manning. Once again, he is every bit as good as Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Every bit as good. I've got him as in a 5-way tie for the greatest quarterback of all time. I've got Manning, Brady, Brees, Joe Montana, and Aaron Rodgers.
You can't just put a 5-way tie for the greatest quarterback of all time.
NFL quarterbacks is so small. If you look at, in Drew Brees' career, you look at Peyton Manning had Marvin Harrison, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. They've had that Hall of Fame player they've played almost their whole career. While Drew Brees has had a lot of good targets, arguably he hasn't had that guy the way Brady and Manning have had. Yes, he's played in a little bit more of a passing offense, but he's still got a better passer rating than both of those guys. And he's in the same era. Tom, you're talking about different eras back in the day and saying the stats don't compare. Well, Brees has more points, more yards per game, better passer rating. This is both in the regular season and the playoffs than Manning and Brady. And a lot of it is that Brees and Manning have played with worse defenses. You look at Tom Brady, why has he won all those Super Bowls? Well, he played on the Patriots where they had those defenses. Now let me pull up some of my statistics here. So I'm not talking out of my head. So the reason why I've got a 5-way tie, first off, Joe Montana is one of my guys in the 5-way tie. Of all the guys in the 90s era, he has the best passer rating in the playoffs and the second best in the regular season behind Steve Young. So Montana's 4-0 in the Super Bowl, but I don't care so much about Super Bowls because it's a team game. I look at Brees. Brees has put up all the numbers that Manning and Brady have. And Rodgers, by the way, Aaron Rodgers, you might lose some longevity points, but Aaron Rodgers has the best passer rating of all time. He has the best touchdown to interception ratio of all time. So you talk about the eye test and seeing who's better, well, Aaron Rodgers arguably is the most talented guy out of all of these guys because he's got the best arm strength. He can run around the most. He's got a ton of ability. Meanwhile, Peyton and Brady, again, Manning, more yards in the regular season, more touchdowns per game in the regular season than Brady. And he had all the records until he retired. So statistically speaking, you look at Brees and Manning are actually a little bit ahead, but Rodgers is a little bit ahead when you look at efficiency. Now, Brady is second in touchdown to interception ratio of all those guys. Another guy that might slip into the conversation, Russell Wilson, started in 2012. He's second all time in TD to INT ratio. So it just, the stats are simply too close. And I think one area that Brees gets underlooked at is part of the quarterback position is accuracy and part of it is touch. You look at Brees, they say he doesn't have a cannon of an arm, but did you watch that Sunday night game? That beautiful pass. He lofted it right over two defenders. He has better touch on his, lob ball than Brady or Manning or anyone ever. So you can't discount the touch. You can't discount the accuracy and the smarts. I just think there's so many guys who are roughly the same. I think you put Drew Brees on the Patriots all those years. You put Peyton Manning on the Patriots all those years. I think they probably have 5-6 Super Bowl rings. None of those guys stands out to me. I think there's very little that separates all of them. You look at statistics in one area, one guy is slightly better. In another area, it's another guy. You look at accuracy and you look at touch, you look at arm strength. They all kind of cancel each other out to me. I just have a hard time, and I just don't buy how Drew Brees, who's played in the same era as Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, has more yards, more touchdowns than both of these guys, and he's kind of mentioned as kind of a second tier behind them. I just don't buy it.
No, I think he's definitely on the first tier, like Drew. You were saying that these are the best three quarterbacks.
He's number 3.
Somebody has
the same tier. It's the same tier. You had a 5-way tie for the greatest quarterback.
Drew has a 3-way tie. That's all it is.
No, Drew has Brady and Manning both ahead. Probably Brady first, Manning second, Brees third. Do you not?
I said I probably trust Brady the most with the game on the line, but Manning and Brees aren't behind. That's what I said. I didn't rank them.
Right, but if you had to rank them 1, 2, 3, you'd probably go Brady, Manning, Brees, would you not?
They'd be all in a tie for first, since we can do ties.
Well, that's what I think, but my problem is that you hear Brady and Manning mentioned in the same breath, and Brees is viewed as kind of the second tier of the greatest of that era. You don't ever hear people discussing, Brees versus Manning versus Brady. It's always been Brady versus Manning. And part of it is because Brees has played in less playoff games, but he's played on some terrible Saints teams. And he's put up incredible numbers in the playoffs, by the way.
Right.
A per game basis even better than those two guys. So it's not like the Saints aren't winning in the playoffs because of Drew Brees. And he does have a Super Bowl too, by the way.
Well, I think the whole big narrative of Manning and Brady is because they played in the same conference. They had so many more postseason collisions than Brees did because he played in San Diego for a little bit, but most of his career has been in New Orleans. So from a narrative perspective, I think that's why we talk about Brady and Manning more in the same breath, is because it's Yankees Red Sox, it's Duke North Carolina, that is the rivalry. So I think from an optics standpoint, Brees probably does fall a little bit behind, just on the Q rating. But I think it's a slim margin between all three of these guys. I mean, top 10 in 100 years of NFL football is no small feat. I think top 5, again, then you start pushing out guys that were great in a different era. So, for me, I do have Brees behind Brady and then Manning. And it's not by much, but
Who do
it's
you have number 1?
Number 1 overall or number 1 between?
All time.
All time? I'd probably say Brady's probably number 1 all time.
We can agree, though, assuming that he doesn't get injured, the greatest quarterback of all time will, in fact, be Patrick Mahomes.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see if he plays 20 years. I mean, the guy has to play at least 10 years in order to be talked about in that way.
Right, but I look at him the same way that you look at, Lionel Messi in soccer when he was 23 years old, or Michael Jordan when he played with, Magic and Bird, or even LeBron James a few years back. Like, you could tell that they're the best in the game, and they're probably the best ever, or at least in the conversation. It's just that they haven't played the years. But you look at Patrick Mahomes, he's better at everything than all of these guys. And he's first to 100 touchdown passes and has less interceptions than any of the other guys.
But stats are only one way to look at it. There's also longevity. I think longevity it's not a given, as we can tell with a lot of quarterbacks. So you have to give a lot of credit for these guys who have played the quarterback position and been reliable in that position for 18 plus years. That's a huge feat.
That's why Tom Brady is still playing. He's obsessed with getting a lot of the records, I think. So
but he's playing at a high level, though, for the most part. He's not a schlub out there. Like, he's playing well. He's not out there just to be out there.
Unless he plays the Saints.
Yes. One game.
He wasn't very good the first time out against the Saints either, by the way.
I think we can reconvene in like season 15 of Old Man Saluters and talk about Patrick Mahomes ascending to the number 1 overall ranking on quarterback.
Drew, we can reconvene in 15 years, but I will go ahead and transition. How do you like that? Me transitioning?
I think pointing out the transition kind of defeats the whole impact of the transition.
All right, well, anywho, we're going to transition anyways, even though it's been deflected. So Patrick Mahomes, this I think we can agree on, is the best young quarterback in the NFL, 4 to 5 seasons in. No one else touches him. So for the sake of this argument, we're going to exclude Patrick Mahomes, and we're going to go ahead and rank our top 5 young quarterbacks in the NFL. We're a little loose with who we consider young. I'll get into that a little bit. And we'll more discuss our top guy. But real quick, run your 5 through 1 down.
Yeah, so the basis of this whole debate point is the Arizona-Miami game, a game that last week we had as a matchup of our surprises of the season. Drew, hats off to you for getting that one correct. Tua Tagovailoa and Kyler Murray going head-to-head back and forth in a great game. Helps to have defenses that are a little bit civvy for the day. But that's what's kind of prompted this conversation. We've seen a lot of good young quarterbacks play this year. For me, my top 5 is a little bit of kind of like older young quarterbacks and young quarterbacks. Number 1 for me is Deshaun Watson. He just looks the part, and he seems to continue to do more with less and less. This Texans organization is giving him no help, trading away his best receiver, trading away his best left tackle for protection. So for me, it goes Watson, followed by Kyler Murray, who's really, really impressed this year, arm and legs. Lamar Jackson is 3 for me. Reigning MVP, 36 touchdowns and 4 interceptions last year. Not quite as good this year. I don't know if it's necessarily NFL's figuring him out a little bit. I don't know if it's just a lack of talent around him as far as offensive weapons go. I have him as 3. Justin Herbert for the LA Chargers. My goodness, he's putting up insane numbers and still getting heartbroken every single week. And then I'll go Joe Burrow. To round out my top 5. He's doing a really good job in Cincinnati, adjusting to the NFL with, much like Herbert, with no preparation through preseason or anything like that.
Drew, what's your top 5?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, and, obviously these guys are all, very good. And, Lamar, I like to put him as number 1 because he's won 78% of his games. I mean, that's a tremendous figure there, and his impact on a game is just so big. And the opposing team, the thing is, they know he's going to run, and yet his career, he's averaging 5.9 yards per carry. He's thrown 54 touchdowns to just 14 interceptions. Tom, you mentioned he also won an MVP, so you got to give it to Lamar for number 1. Number 2, I've gone back and forth, but I think just Deshaun Watson, he's averaging 5.4 5.6 yards per carry. Number 3, Josh Allen. Number 4, Kyler Murray. And then 5, Justin Herbert. Great arm, good decisions. Unfortunately, his defense is losing them ball games, and I think he could catapult in the next year or two above the Josh Allens and Kyler Murrays, but we'll see.
So Drew said that he was afraid that this would turn into a Lamar Jackson hate fest for me. So I'll keep it brief. So first off, I'm gonna have a few guys why I don't put him in there. That I won't put Lamar Jackson in for the simple basis is that I'm afraid that he was a one-hit wonder. I think, and he could be number 5, number 4. He could be higher if he realizes what he does well, and he could be 2 or 3 in the regular season if he focuses on running the ball. However, he's trying to be a little bit more of a passer this year, and he's just not a very good passer, and that's why I look at him in the playoffs. We've seen him get completely shut down in the playoffs. We saw him get shut down against the Steelers, a great defense. He can't beat the Chiefs because he can't keep up with Mahomes. Even the Colts last week did a good job of shutting him down. You talk about his his career yards per carry. Well, last year he was at about 7 yards. This year about 6 yards. 8 games in, he's on pace to get under 1,000 yards. Last season he had 1,200. So we've seen his rushing take a little bit of a hit. His passing, I think last year they did a good job of disguising his weaknesses. They gave him a lot of touchdown passes. He's good at taking care of the ball. But when I look for a quarterback in the NFL, it's a passing league. What are you going to win with? You got to pass the ball. So Lamar is just outside the top 5 for me, just because he hasn't proven in the playoffs. In the NFL, it's about passing the ball. I don't put him in there. I also don't put yet at least Justin Herbert, because as good as he's played, he's had the opportunity to make some clutch plays for his team, and he hasn't made the clutch plays. He's still very young. I want to see more of a sample size from him, and I want to see him come up with the clutch plays. I'll start with my number 5. I'll go 5-1. So number 5, I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson. You guys hit on it a little bit. He lost DeAndre Hopkins. It's not his fault. The Texans stink. He's actually 6th in the NFL in passing yards. He's having a pretty solid season. They just have no running game and no defense, so they're losing. Number 4, Josh Allen. I'm surprised Tom didn't put him in there. He's got probably the best arm strength in the NFL, except for maybe Mahomes. The problem with him has always been accuracy. Well, this season, he's all of a sudden 6th in the NFL in completion percentage. He can run the ball well. He's a dual threat guy. I got to put him in the top 5. Number 3, Joe Burrow. And gosh, 3 through 1 for me are almost a virtual tie, but I won't do it for the sake of this argument. Joe Burrow coming off the greatest college season of all time. This season, he plays on a terrible Bengals team. He's been sacked more than any quarterback in the NFL. I think he's tied with Carson Wentz. His receivers are terrible. A.J. Green is way past his prime. Yet he's putting up all sorts of numbers, 8th in the NFL in passing yards per game. He's on pace to break just about every rookie passing record. Again, a guy who can run and pass. He's athletic. He's got a great arm strength. He's great. Number 2, are you kidding me? This is a guy neither of you guys have in your top 5. Tua, I'm not going to pronounce his last name. I think
it's played in 2 games.
This guy was the best of all these guys in recent years. He was the best college player of all of them. Just because he got injured, we forgot about him. Talking about touch, you know how I said Drew Brees has beautiful touch? Well, Tua throws a beautiful ball. He's just like Drew Brees, just a left-handed version of touch, but he has even a better arm. This was basically his first game where they asked him to go out and win a game. 20 of 28, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns against Arizona on the road. Tua was graded as pretty much the best recent prospect here in the last 5 years up until the injury. If I'm drafting guys, number 2 has to be Tua of the young quarterbacks. I'm completely shocked and quite frankly disappointed neither of you have him in your top 5.
You didn't say drafting guys.
No, top 5 young quarterbacks. He's got to be top 5.
He's played in 2 games. We have no idea if he's
said
good.
Lamar Miller. the reigning MVP of the National
Jackson.
Football League, Lamar Jackson, thank you, could be a one-hit wonder, and yet you have Tua Tagovailoa, who's had one good game. You're going to base one good game. You're going to put that above an entire MVP
You know what I'm using now, Tom, is you like to say, I'm using the eye test. I saw him play in college, and I saw what he did for the Dolphins.
Also, sample size.
Just like the things he did in college. I'm talking about talent-wise. He's number 2, and he's close to number 1. Don't forget about Tua. If I'm picking guys, if I want a guy right now today, I would take Tua because he's got a lot of upside, and he's got all the skills. Can you guys guess who my number 1 is, though?
I don't know. We passed all the viable options for number 1 like 3 picks ago, so go ahead.
Kyler Murray is my number 1 because he is the best dual threat quarterback, quite possibly talent-wise, of all time.
Did we do 2?
He's number 1.
No, who was your number 2, though? Was that
Tua?
Who was 3 then?
Joe Burrow.
Allen
Josh Allen
5.
was 4 and Deshaun Watson was 5.
Okay, there we go. Okay, my bad.
So Kyler Murray is my number 1. He's 9th in the NFL in QBR. The only guy ahead of him in this stat in this group is Josh Allen. And Josh Allen's in year 3. Kyler's year 2. And he's leading quarterbacks in rushing this year. He's actually faster than Lamar Jackson. And as you mentioned, Tom, a couple weeks ago, he knows how to slide. So he knows how to, prevent possible injury. And what's crazy is his arm strength is incredible, but he still needs to work on his accuracy. And once he gets the accuracy completely down, in terms of a lot of times when you think of dual threat quarterbacks, you think of a guy who's maybe a little bit better as a runner as opposed to a passer or vice versa. Well, when you look at Kyler Murray, he's almost as good at passing as he is at running. He can beat you out of the pocket. He can beat you running the ball. He's faster than all the other running quarterbacks we have. He's more elusive, and he's got a better arm than any of these guys except for maybe Josh Allen. Kyler Murray is a guy you need to look out for. He's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Too early to tell. I'll say that much.
Well, we're having fun. It's the sake of this argument. I mean, you got to make your top 5. I will say one guy that we didn't mention, and I didn't really include him as a young quarterback, even though he's still relatively young, Dak Prescott in his 5th year. We're mostly focusing on guys 3 to 4 years in. Dak, 4-year senior in college. We kind of already know what he can do. For the sake of argument, though, I might put him ahead of Watson and Allen, but I'm not putting anyone ahead of Kyler Murray. I think that Kyler Murray and Tua matchup we saw this weekend are the 2 best young quarterbacks in the NFL for me.
I mean, the teams will figure out Kyler, dude. If they figured out Lamar Jackson, they'll figure out Kyler Murray.
That's the point, though. Lamar Jackson was never a great passer. Kyler Murray.
But you just called Kyler Murray the best.
Incredible deep ball. Kyler Murray's passing level is incredible. He throws a great deep ball. He's got great arm strength. That's the difference between Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson. Well, they figured out Lamar Jackson because they figured out how to stop his running game. He was never going to beat you passing the ball. The Ravens are second to lowest in the NFL in passing yards per game in the whole league, 31st in passing.
Yeah, because that's not their game plan. That's not what they want to do. They want to run the ball.
I know, but I'm looking at this metric. I'm looking at what quarterback can take my team all the way. I'm not a Tom Castleman here who settles with division titles. Yes, Lamar Jackson's a great regular season quarterback. He can lead you to a division title. But I look at Lamar Jackson. Is he the guy that can lead you to a Super Bowl when he goes up against a great defense and is forced to beat you passing the ball? Absolutely not. By the way, he's never led a double-digit comeback in his whole career. What did we see from Kyler Murray a couple Sundays ago against the Seahawks? He was down double digits. He led his team back. In the playoffs, when the going gets tough and you have to pass the ball, Lamar Jackson, I don't trust him. Kyler Murray, he can pass and run. He has multiple ways to beat you. He is number 1 of the young quarterbacks because he has many ways to beat you, and he's better at running and passing than Deshaun Watson, who'd be the other guy I think of that can beat you both ways. Kyler's a better version of Deshaun Watson.
I don't know how you can use Lamar Jackson's lack of playoff success against him when none of the other quarterbacks on this list have a quarterback win to share among them.
Right.
I mean, we all have
guys have not played in the playoffs. But I look at what it takes to win in the playoffs. You got to pass the ball in the modern day NFL.
Well, sure, but like we haven't seen a lot of the guys on this list even in the playoffs. You know, we got some rookies on here. Like if we're going with who are these best top 5 talents today, to have guys that haven't even finished a complete season above literal MVPs just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. You can talk about projecting stuff forward, and that can be a different conversation.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about talented guys. Who would you rather have on your team, Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray? I'd rather have Kyler Murray.
That's fine. Like, it's fine to have Kyler Murray. I had him number 2 on the list. I just think to have Lamar Jackson completely off is I mean, it's personal preference. I don't think every quarterback has to look the same way necessarily to have success in the league. I mean, I don't know. I have him as 3. I don't think you can have a former MVP not on a top 5 list for the criteria that we've set forward. It's just
fair. And again, I think the gaps between a lot of these guys are very small. I think, I have Lamar as tied for 6th. I don't think he's that far behind Joe Burrow necessarily. But I still think in the NFL, in order to win it all these days, you got to be able to pass the ball. And it depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about regular season QB, again, I might want Lamar Jackson in the regular season as 3rd or 4th. But I'm looking at it more of who can win for me in the playoffs. I value playoff wins more than regular season wins. And I just don't see Lamar Jackson as being the type of guy who can beat a great team in a playoff game. We talk about some of these other guys.
But in the last segment, didn't you say I don't care about the Super Bowl wins? You brought that up. Right. You said you don't care about Super Bowl wins. But what are we talking about then?
No. That's a team game. But those guys, if they're surrounded with good players, you look at Lamar Jackson, the Ravens have arguably the best defense in the NFL. So he has a great defense on his team. So if you were a good enough passer with that defense, they can win.
How many of his receivers? We'll go pass catchers, tight end.
John Brown is a very talented receiver who could be like a Tyreek Hill if he had Patrick Mahomes as his quarterback. But John Brown's talent is being wasted by Lamar Jackson.
John Brown is in Buffalo. He has Josh Allen throwing the ball to him, along with Stephon.
John Brown. Who's the other guy who has the?
That's what I'm asking. You've got Hollywood Brown.
Isn't that him?
Different player. John Brown's different from Marquise Brown. So you got Marquise Brown.
Marquise Brown.
Second year player, somewhat inconsistent with the numbers that he's been putting up. And
have you seen him run?
I have seen him run.
Patrick Mahomes will make him look like Tyreek Hill.
Would you put him up against DeAndre Hopkins with Kyler Murray? Would you put him up against Keenan Allen with Justin Herbert? Tyler Boyd with Joe Burrow? Let's see, who else?
I would put him over Tyler Boyd. Yes, absolutely.
Well, that's probably why I'm beating you in fantasy. Would you put, let's see, who else do we have on this list? Who are some of these other quarterbacks? Deshaun Watson doesn't have anybody. Stephon Diggs and John Brown for Josh Allen. I think like the offensive weapons around Lamar Jackson are important. I don't think the Ravens have invested in him as much as they ought to. The way that, say, Buffalo did with Josh Allen. Josh Allen's more accurate this year. Stephon Diggs.
They know that Lamar Jackson isn't going to find these guys, even if they gave him the guys, because he doesn't throw an accurate ball. He doesn't throw an accurate deep ball.
I mean, he's an MVP-winning quarterback. Of course he can throw an accurate ball in some way, shape, or form.
Second to worst in the NFL in passing yards.
Yeah, because he doesn't have anybody around him. We just established that.
It doesn't matter. First off, you see Drew Brees has been throwing a random guy some weeks. He's got a ton of guys injured. Lamar, a great quarterback, finds a way back.
Yeah, but Drew Brees is an amazing quarterback.
Player. I think if you sit down, Tom talks about the eye test. As much as I love stats, I also look at the eye test, and you watch a game, and you don't see Lamar. I've actually watched him in person against the Chiefs a couple years ago, and he can't consistently make a stick throw and can't consistently throw a good ball. Like, yes, okay, he would be better if he needs better targets.
Sure.
That is part of the problem. But I'm also talking about the eye test. Kyler Murray can fling the ball, 50 yards, perfect, right on the spot. Josh Allen can throw the ball 75 yards. Lamar Jackson does not have the ability that some of these other quarterbacks do. He's a better runner, and they have a great offensive line, and they invested in his running game. But I think we've seen that doesn't work in the playoffs. Some of these other guys, we haven't seen them play in the playoffs yet, but they can't possibly play any worse than Lamar Jackson has played in the playoffs.
All right,
That's
we'll
my
see.
thing.
We'll see. We've got expanded playoffs this year. Maybe we'll see some more of these young quarterbacks in.
Yeah, and we will definitely revisit this in a few months, and we'll see what's up with Lamar Jackson. What about some college football talk? Speaking of young quarterbacks, Clemson, no Trevor Lawrence. DJ, I'm not going to say his last name, filled in, played great, over 400 yards, but they still lost in overtime to Notre Dame. What does this mean for the college football playoff picture? How has the landscape of college football changed when number one mighty Clemson goes down at Notre Dame? Something that was kind of surprising. We all picked Clemson in this game.
Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I think if Notre Dame wins out, of course the Fighting Irish will be in the playoff, but likely going to have to play Clemson again in Charlotte in the ACC championship game come December. If that ends up happening, that's going to be a heck of a ball game. So you have to think whoever wins the ACC championship game is in. The loser of that game might be out. It depends on how things shake out. But, you have to think that Alabama is going to get in, Ohio State, the winner of the ACC championship game. And then who's that fourth spot? Who knows? I don't know. It could be a group of 5 team like Cincinnati, or it could be like the loser of the ACC title game or the loser of the SEC title game.
So I think that, first off, the SEC title game loser is done because it's going to be probably Florida, and that would make their second loss. So this is going to be one of those years where the SEC is only going to get one team. It's going to be Alabama. I think as much as I love Zach Wilson out of BYU, he's mini Patrick Mahomes, as I call him, going to be the steal of this next NFL draft. Mark that down right now. This is an all-pro quarterback waiting to happen. As much as I like him, as much as I like Cincinnati and what they're doing with their dominant wins, at the end of the day, the college football playoff committee is going to see the big-name quarter programs. Alabama, number one, 13th season in a row. They've been ranked number one. I think they're going to run the table. They look so good right now. You look at Ohio State. The Big Ten is really down right now. Penn State is 0-3. Wisconsin has missed a bunch of games because of coronavirus concerns. Michigan is way down. Indiana might be the second best team in the Big Ten. I think they are ranking-wise, which tells you how down the Big Ten is. Ohio State's going to run the table there, and it's going to come down to, you look at Clemson and Notre Dame. Well, they rematch in the ACC title game, and if Notre Dame keeps it relatively close, which I think they probably will, I think this last game was a bit of a fluke in that Clemson not only didn't have Trevor Lawrence, they had 3 key defensive players out, 2 linebackers and a defensive lineman. That really hurt them. The defense late in the game couldn't get the stop. But I think that Clemson beats Notre Dame in the rematch. But if it's relatively close, how are you going to say that powerhouse Notre Dame traditional program, 1 loss to Clemson, and they beat Clemson head-to-head, isn't going to get in the playoff? I think that's our final 4 playoff teams are the teams that we have ranked now. The only scenario that someone else sneaks in is if Clemson loses to Notre Dame again, which I just don't see happening personally, because this was at Notre Dame with several key players left for Clemson, and Notre Dame barely won the game. Clemson probably would have won the game if they passed late in the game. What was concerning for them, only 34 rushing yards as a team. Etienne, 18 carries for 28 yards. That was surprising, and I think, Ian Book played better than I've given him credit for. He played well for Notre Dame. I'll take the loss on that one. Believe it or not, I admit it when I'm wrong. But I think that's going to be our playoff. And I think though Ohio State is a little bit better than I thought. I was saying it.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys that it seems like the playoff picture is pretty well set, barring major injuries or COVID or anything like that. Even if Clemson loses to Notre Dame again, I still think that they get in just because the committee is going to go based on talent. I think that I kind of view this game on parallel lines with a professional game we talked about, Saints and Buccaneers. I said that loss for the Buccaneers doesn't discount them from the contender list. It just elevates the Saints. I think it's the same thing with Notre Dame. Given that Trevor Lawrence was out, numerous injuries on defense for the Clemson Tigers, I think that, they're going to get a pass, so to speak, especially playing this one as close as it was and into as many overtimes as it went. It just means that Notre Dame faults over Georgia and Florida with that SEC game resulting in another loss for the Bulldogs. So I think feels pretty well set at this point. Granted, we said that a couple of weeks ago, and we thought that Georgia was definitely going to be the lock for that next team, but they've just really fallen off the pace. I don't see at this late stage that too. I just don't see like at this late stage of the season, one of these top four teams really falling off. It'd be really, really cool to see BYU and Cincinnati in this thing, but I don't think that college football at large is going to want to. It's all going to be about the eyeballs and the money, and that's going to be big name blue chip programs.
So you think that, because I think Clemson will beat Notre Dame, and with one loss, I agree with you, but you think the College Football Playoff Committee would choose a 2-loss Clemson over an undefeated BYU or Cincinnati?
Yeah, it just like take people like us out of it. Think of your average football fan, college football fan, who's going to be more interested in a game. Like that's going to be part of it too, no doubt. Like if there's anything that we've seen out of college football this season, it's that the money is paramount. That's why we have Big Ten football saying we're not going to play and then saying, okay, we're going to play. Same thing with the Pac-12. Same thing why we're continuing with all these games, despite the fact that the SEC has bagged 4 games this week. Wisconsin has missed multiple games this season. They're going to go for the cash. They're going to go for the eyeballs, and they're not going to give a damn about little old BYU or Cincinnati in the college football playoff. That's just the way I see it. I'm a little bit cynical, but they're going to say, nope, Clemson's still way more talented. Put them in.
2-loss Clemson, Drew, or undefeated BYU or Cincinnati?
I have no idea. That's why there should be an 8-team playoff.
I can't disagree with that. That's fair.
That's just so difficult. And you would like to see the group of 5 team get in, but I don't know what the committee's thinking. So, again, it's going to come down to what the committee says, and we'll see what they say.
Yeah, I agree with Tom. It's going to be money. I'm so conflicted because on one hand, like I feel like if Clemson played BYU or Cincinnati, they'll beat them. But on the other hand, resume 2 losses versus 0, that's crazy. I think it won't matter though. I think Clemson will beat Notre Dame next time they play.
Sure.
And the committee will have a pretty easy decision.
Open and shut case, yeah, for sure.
Real quick, the Florida-Georgia game. Florida, do they have any chance against Alabama, assuming they run the table and that's the SEC championship game? Do you give the Gators a fighting chance? Obviously, Alabama's favored, but would a Florida win over Alabama surprise you at all?
It would surprise me a lot because you have to be airtight on both sides of the ball. We saw the Georgia Bulldogs do that for a half against Alabama, and then the wheels fell off the wagon in the second half. You have to be airtight all 4 quarters in order to beat Alabama. I don't see Florida doing that, not with this defense. They have great talent on offense, but the defense has not been very good this year. I don't see it happening.
Drew, what do you think? Florida, any chance against Alabama whatsoever?
Common, you know this. There's always a chance. That's why you play the game.
I knew you'd say that. By the way, I agree with Tom completely. I think a Florida win over Alabama would be shocking. I think Florida's defense is pretty bad. And, their running game isn't necessarily amazing. It's pretty much the Kyle Trask passing attack show, and Florida's not a real contender for me. Obviously, they beat Alabama. They're getting in the playoff, but the chances of them beating Alabama to me are very small. And again, they get 2 losses. It's going to be very hard for them to have a chance. A&M, though, also in the mix. Texas A&M, any chance for them? Because I think they've only got 1 loss, and they beat Florida. I guess they're in the same division as Bama, though, aren't they?
They're in the West, though, so they wouldn't get the opportunity to play in the SEC championship game.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, transitioning to one of Drew's favorite sports. This is probably one of the few sports Drew actually likes more than me. Golf. With golfer. I'm not going to say your email, actually, for the viewers, but you literally got golf in your email. Like, I send out the invite.
Yeah, and in my ESPN name, right?
Yeah. Mr. Golf, I think, is your ESPN name, isn't it?
Yes.
So, Mr. Golf, the Masters is this weekend, the biggest major in golf. Who's going to win the Masters?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, Bryson DeChambeau, he's the favorite. Right behind him, Dustin Johnson, Jon Rahm, Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Brooks Koepka. Bryson won the U.S. Open by 6 shots, so no wonder why he's the favorite of the Masters. We'll see how his length helps him in this tournament. He's thinking about using a 48-inch driver for distance, so we'll see if he does it. We'll see if it works out for him, but I'll go through some of the contenders just real quick here. And then I'll let you guys make your picks. But we'll start with Dustin Johnson, the #1 ranked golfer in the world. He won 3 tournaments last year, including the Tour Championship. He has 4 straight top 10 finishes at the Masters. He should be in good shape, although he did miss a couple tournaments recently after testing positive for COVID, so we'll see how that affects him. Jon Rahm, 2nd ranked player in the world. The last 2 Masters tournaments, he finished 9th last year, 4th in 2018. He won 2 tournaments in 2020. I see Rahm near the top of the leaderboard come Sunday. And don't forget, he already has 2 holes in 1 in the practice round. And one of them, he hit it off the rough over a pond. He skipped his ball over a pond and put it in the hole. So an amazing shot from Jon Rahm, but already has 2 holes in 1 during his Masters practice rounds. Personally, I like Xander Schauffele to win the Masters on Sunday. He's always in the hunt at major events. He finished 2nd at the Tour Championship, 10th in the 2020 PGA Championship, then 2nd at the 2019 Masters, and 3rd at the 2019 U.S. Open. So come Sunday, I think the 27-year-old gets it done.
What about 2 quick names for you? So I believe Jordan Spieth is ranked 75th in the world right now. What happened to him?
Yeah, he's just kind of fallen off. And, I mean, there's always a chance that Jordan Spieth could make a run, but he just hasn't been playing as well lately. But again, it is the Masters, and these guys are professional golfers. You can go out and shoot a 68 on any given day. But it is Augusta National, a very difficult course. So I don't see Jordan finishing in the top 10.
And what about Tiger Woods? Can he defend this crown? Didn't he win last year?
Yeah, Tiger won last year. Obviously he's a popular pick to defend his crown, but it's just I think it's just going to be so tough for Tiger to do it again. I mean, last year was an amazing moment, but these young guys are just so good, and Tiger's getting up there. But again, it's golf. I don't know how old Tiger is right now, but it wouldn't shock me if he won it.
Tom, who's your winner?
Quick question. If Tiger Woods wins the Masters back-to-back, does he just put on the green jacket by himself, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah.
What a great question.
Yeah. Well done.
I like Jon Rahm. Went ahead and went to Bovada and was just like, let's look at the odds and pick somebody who's not the favorite, which is currently Bryson DeChambeau, I believe.
Yeah, DeChambeau's.
So I'll take Jon Rahm. He's had a good year. He's finished in the top 10 in the past 2 Masters, so we'll look for him to get over the top. Plus, Drew, you mentioned that incredible shot where he literally skips the golf ball across the water, rolls up on the green and into the cup. I don't know how much you have to practice that. I bet there's a lot of Titleists just sitting on the bottom of some lake or some pond somewhere where he's working on that trick shot. I'll go with Jon Rahm.
I am going to go with King Rory McIlroy to win the Masters. This guy is ranked number 4 in the world, which I really like. I don't like picking the number 1 guy. Of course, he's been number 1 in the world multiple times throughout his career. He's won every Grand Slam except for every major except for the Masters. He was 4th in 2015, so he's proven he can play well on that course. He's just missing that win. There's just something about Rory. He wakes up for the majors. We always see him perform really well in the majors. This is the only one he hasn't won. I expect Rory to put on a show, and he's one of those really, what's the word? Streaky golfers. You see that in the NBA, but in golf, Rory, I can't remember what year it was, but he had one of the most dominant wins. Was it the British Open, Drew, a few years back? I remember watching. He got so far ahead.
Rory's had some nice wins, but he's also had, one epic collapse comes to mind. So
yeah.
I guess you're right. He is streaky.
Well, I have a feeling on Rory McIlroy, and if you want to play some odds, I think he's not the favorite. He's 4th or 5th favorite. Get yourself a little money, put it on Rory McIlroy. It might pay off for you. Look out for Rory McIlroy.
If somebody wants some golf bets, stay tuned for the locks of the week.
Oh, we got more golf bets. Well, that's my teaser. Get Rory in there. You can get good odds. DraftKings Sportsbook might get you some good odds on that one. Okay, well, MLB awards coming out this week. I believe we just had one announced. What did we have announced, and what are we still missing, guys?
So we had Manager of the Year announced last night. Kevin Cash won that for the Tampa Bay Rays in the American League, and then Don Mattingly won for the Marlins in the National League. Really incredible seasons for both teams and both managers. I think that if you talk to a lot of smart baseball people, Don Mattingly isn't really considered a great manager in a vacuum, but when you consider the obstacles that the Marlins overcame, and granted, they were self-inflicted, just to get them into the playoffs, beating the Cubs in round 1, or in the wild card round, rather, to get to the divisional round. Just a great overall season from a team that nobody expected to win. And then the Rays, of course, a team that has talent, but definitely has budget concerns. Kevin Cash doing a great job getting them the 2nd best record in baseball and runner-up in the World Series. So those are the 2 managers of the year. We have MVP and Cy Young for both American and National League yet to be determined.
Real fast, I'll run over a quick stat that I saw that I thought was really impressive in regards to Don Mattingly. In total, the Marlins used, and a lot of this is because of COVID and injuries. They were, of course, the first team that really got struck by COVID in baseball. The Cardinals were the second. Those were kind of the 2 teams that really got hit by it. But in total, the Marlins used 61 players this season with 174 different roster moves. 18 of those players made their MLB debuts. Despite the ever-changing roster, Mattingly led the Marlins to a 2nd-place finish in the NL East and the club's first playoff appearance since 2003. We might remember that team beating the Cubs. Steve Bartman, Alex Gonzalez error. Mark Pryor stays out in the 8th. The Cubs lose Game 6. Kerry Wood hits a home run in Game 7. It didn't matter. Derek Lee, the future Cub, played great in those last couple games. So that's the Marlins. Josh Beckett was the ace player. They had Dontrelle Willis, names from back in the day. That's the last time those guys were in the playoffs. So hats off to Mattingly, kind of doing more with less type scenario. Kevin Cash obviously screwed up the World Series, but this is a regular season award. The Rays had the best record in the American League. He deserves it. As for the upcoming awards, do you want to do the Cy Young first? Who we think will win? Who should win? because the Cy Young is pretty easy. I think the MVPs could lead to some good debate. So
Yeah.
NL Cy Young finalists: Trevor Bauer from the Reds, Yu Darvish from the Cubs, and Jacob deGrom from the New York Mets. Who do you guys got and why?
I think this is, if not the toughest, maybe the second toughest pick. I'm going to go with Jacob deGrom to win it for a third year in a row. I think that you look at the numbers. Yeah, Trevor Bauer had a good year. I wonder how much.
A good year?
He had a great year. I wonder how much the voters will take into account the fact that teams only played within certain divisions this year. If you look at the overall talent in the National League Central, not really great teams across the board. Cardinals, Brewers, Cubs, and Pirates, not great offensive teams. Meanwhile, Jacob deGrom has to go up against the Tampa Bay Rays, the Blue Jays, who were not playing in Toronto this year, the Yankees.
Well, deGrom is in the NL. He's not playing.
No, it was split up by NL and AL East, and then Central, and then West is how they did it in baseball.
That's fair.
So playing against all those teams on the East, there were a lot of high-powered offenses. I wonder how much that will factor where voters are going to weight Bauer's great numbers against not as great competition to Jacob deGrom's continued excellence against higher quality. I think that's how it'll play out. Wouldn't surprise me if Bauer won, though.
I think you're one of the few people that's really looking at this closely. You know, I love to look at stuff. I definitely didn't look at it this closely. You may have a point. However, I think one thing that gets lost in sports is that these are professional athletes. A lot of them can hit. A lot of them are very good. You look at their numbers, and they're not even really that comparable. Trevor Bauer, 1.73 ERA. deGrom, 2.38. Darvish, 2.01. Bauer led the National League in earned run average, in hits per 9 innings, in whip and opponent batting average. I guess the one thing people might say is he was only 5-4, whereas you had Darvish, who was 8-3 for the Cubs. But you guys know this. I believe an earned run average is much more important than ERA. I am Mr. ERA because, brings back our old debate in college. Felix Hernandez, the Cy Young. What year was that? 2011, Drew, 2012, who knows? I think that was before Tom was on our show, actually.
No, I was on that show.
You were on that show? Well,
yeah, pitching wins are an overrated stat, just like saves. They don't really mean anything. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I look at Bauer's numbers, and I would say, I can see where you're coming from, but 1.73 ERA against 2.38, that's a pretty big gap. And I know we did have a shortened season, so I don't know that he would have kept it up, but we don't really see ERAs under 2 anymore in baseball. That's extremely rare. We did see it in the American League too, but still, 1.73 ERA, that's exceptional. And it's crazy because Trevor Bauer hasn't had that great of a career. He's been okay, but this is kind of like his 1 year that sort of is an outlier compared to the rest of his seasons. But to me, he's been the best pitcher in the National League all season long. The consistency, best ERA, he wins it for me.
Yeah, I've got Trevor Bauer. He had a great year of pitching, and you mentioned the ERA, 1.73. I know. I agree. Jacob deGrom did face tougher competition, but I got to side with Bauer on this one.
Speaking of ERA, the only guy in baseball who did have a better ERA than him was Shane Bieber from the Indians, American League Cy Young candidate. Kenton Maeda from the Twins, the former Dodger. And hopefully I pronounced this name right. Hyun-Jin Ryu. I practiced this. A lot of practice for the Blue Jays. Did I do okay with that one?
I think it's Hyun-Jin Ryu. I think. I'm not 100% either.
I watched multiple YouTube videos, so
we'll go with you on that one then.
I think this one is pretty easy.
Hyun-Jin Ryu.
So that's what I said, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow. Good job, Common. Pat on the back. Again, I think this one's pretty easy. 1.63 ERA, best in baseball. Led all of MLB pitchers in wins above replacement. Also, strikeouts led the AO in hits per 9 innings and strikeouts per 9 innings. He was literally unhittable because you look at a 1.63 ERA and he's leading the league in strikeouts. Again, a guy that kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, like really isn't like that big name recognition, much like Trevor Bauer in the National League. I got to go with Shane Bieber.
Yeah, I think Shane Bieber that's the easiest call that we'll have with these end of season awards. I have him winning it as well.
Yes, as do I.
Toughest call, in my opinion. Both are very tough calls. The two toughest calls. I'll start with what I consider the toughest call for MLB awards: the National League MVP. So we got Mookie Betts, who stole a taco for America. I got my free taco in the World Series. So I'm a little biased towards him, but of course, this is a regular season award, so tacos don't factor in. Steal a base, steal a taco. Freddie Freeman from the Atlanta Braves and Manny Machado from the Padres. What do you guys think?
I don't know how much you guys know this about me, but I am a huge fan of using the win above replacement statistic when comparing position players across positions. Mookie Betts, I think, affects the game in more ways than a lot of other players do. So at 3.4 WAR this year, he is literally the best, most valuable player in baseball in terms of adding wins to his team's total. He can do it with bat, glove, speed, arm. For me, it's going to be Mookie Betts winning the MVP.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because Freddie Freeman had more runs, total bases, doubles, and hits than Mookie Betts. But, I got to agree. The WAR for Mookie Betts is just so high that you got to take him.
I originally had Betts, but I actually am going to go. I've got him at a virtual tie, but I'm going to give a slight edge to Freddie Freeman, actually, just because Freeman had the most RBI in baseball. On base percentage, I believe, was second, and the best of these guys. Drew said it: more runs, more doubles, more hits. Across the board, he had better hitting numbers than all three of these guys. And Mookie Betts is an incredible fielder. Even though he didn't win it this year, Freddie Freeman has won a Gold Glove in the past, as is Manny Machado. So what's special about all three of these candidates? Sure, Mookie Betts won the Gold Glove this year, but these other two guys are also great defensive players. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, wins above replacement, how is that calculated exactly? Is it on his own team at that position? How does it work?
So wins above replacement is essentially how many wins you are above a replacement level player. So it's not a specific person that you're measured up against. It's just if we were to take an average player who does not cost your team any wins and doesn't add any wins to your team, I'm not sure like the full, I've never been really good about the whole math formula behind it, but that's just the overall concept. So in talking about WAR, Mookie Betts is 3.4 wins on the win-loss column, more valuable than if you just put a doesn't cost you anything, doesn't gain you anything right fielder.
Right. So is that 3 wins over a 60-game season then?
It doesn't matter. It's just how many wins that he adds to his team. It's 3.4 over a 60-game season because they only played 60 games. If they were to play 162 games, that number would keep going up. So it accumulates over time.
Okay. Well, again, it's very hard to say. I don't know. Freddie Freeman, I think there's a lot of good first basemen. I like Freeman's stats a little bit better, but I can definitely see the argument for Mookie Betts. Again, that was my hardest pick. I originally was going to go with Mookie Betts. I looked at the WAR. I saw that jumped out to me. But then I looked at everything. I give the slight edge to Freddie Freeman. But you can't go wrong with either of them, to be honest.
For sure, yeah. It's going to be either player is going to be well deserving of that award.
American League MVP DJ LeMahieu from the Yankees, Jose Abreu from the White Sox, or Jose Ramirez from the Indians. This is kind of a pretty close race, I would say, as well, between the first two guys. I think Jose Ramirez distant third, probably between Abreu and LeMahieu for you.
I actually have that flipped. I have DJ LeMahieu as a distant third. Jose Ramirez was pretty much the only offense that the Cleveland baseball team had over like the last month of the season. And for me, I'll admit this is a little bit of a homer pick, but Jose Abreu averaged an RBI per game. Now, I understand RBI isn't really a great statistic because that's a function of your teammates on base percentage and your slugging percentage and where you are in the lineup.
It's an important stat.
It's more dependent on the team around, on how your teammates are doing around you than you yourself. It's not necessarily 1-to-1. You can't have RBIs if your teammates aren't on base necessarily. So it's not the best statistic to use, but still pretty cool that he averaged 1 per game. As far as WAR goes, he is 1/10 of a win behind DJ LeMahieu, and I believe a couple tenths of a win above Jose Ramirez. I'm going to go homer on this one. I'm going to go Jose Abreu winning an MVP for the White Sox, giving them some good news after the debacle of their manager, which we don't necessarily have to talk about. I just want to throw that one in there real quick.
Real quick, Tim Anderson, how far behind him was he in the MVP race? Because I watched the White Sox game late in the season, and Steve Stone was talking about how it's, tough between those two guys on the same team.
Yeah, when you consider the fact that Tim Anderson in the month of September, or maybe it was the entire season, I wasn't prepared to talk about this, so I don't know for sure, had more multi-hit games than he did games without a hit at all. You also consider the fact that he plays I would say the second most important defensive position on the field at shortstop. That inherently makes him more valuable than a first baseman does. So he's probably MVP in terms of, if he's not playing, the White Sox aren't doing as well, but in terms of just like the national rhetoric of who's putting up the numbers, Abreu is the better choice, or the better candidate for that award.
You would take Anderson over Abreu if you had to personally?
Yeah, if only because most valuable to his team. You can replace a first baseman a hell of a lot easier than you can replace a shortstop.
Is catcher the most important defensive position then? I'd
say it's the most difficult to play. If you're looking at metrics, it probably goes shortstop, then center field is the two most difficult. But for me, because man, how can you do that to your knees 100+ times a year? To me, that's the most difficult one, no matter what the metrics.
My 4th grade baseball coach wanted me to catch, and I told him I didn't want to kneel down. And I was like, I do like catching the ball. I was like, Coach put me at first base. I was pretty good at first base.
Sure.
So I became I later transitioned to third base because I got stuck behind the coach's son, and the coach's son was the first baseman. So, you can't beat the coach's son, but, so third base, I played third base later on, but the irony behind it is I ended up being a little league umpire. So I ended up having to crouch down anyways.
Yeah.
So I lost the debate. But I definitely think catcher is the most important position over shortstop and center field. I think, I struggled with this one, but I'm going to go with Abreu also. I think he's got the most RBI in baseball, 60. I think RBI to me is a pretty important stat because it shows you when you're getting your hits. It's almost like a look at like NBA, they look at points per game. But when are your points coming? Like Chris Paul wasn't necessarily, a leading scorer in the NBA, but he was like the most clutch points and fourth quarter points. Well, run batted in is when are you getting your hits in home runs? Sure. He was first in RBI. He had more home runs, RBI, and runs than Ramirez or LeMahieu. I got to go to Abreu. Real quick, though, you mentioned the team game, and I forgot to bring this up in my argument, and I was meaning to. The reason why I would go Freddie Freeman slightly over Mookie Betts, as great as Mookie Betts is, that Dodgers lineup is so stacked that you can make a case for Corey Seager, you can make a case for Turner, Bellinger. You take Betts, Betts is valuable because he has the all-around game, but there's multiple guys on his team who are roughly his level, as opposed to Freeman, as good as Acuna Jr. is. He's kind of the star there. But back to the AL MVP, Abreu put up the best numbers, played on a playoff team. Give me Jose Abreu. Win it for Chicago.
Yeah, LeMahieu's numbers and Jose Abreu's numbers are close, but Abreu played in more games than LeMahieu, and this year that matters. He played in 10 more games than DJ LeMahieu. That's 17% of the season this year. So I think that matters. The edge goes to Jose Abreu.
That's a great way to look at it. I didn't think of it in terms of like availability in a 60-game condensed season as being part of the value you provide. That's a great statistic.
Absolutely. And you look at it this way, had LeMahieu played, 10 more games, do the Yankees get in a better position with the record? Because, they lost to 5 games against the Rays. Could they have been in better positioning? Possibly. I don't know.
I don't think so, because at that point they were doing the bubble site. So there's no real home field advantage. It's just like who gets last reps.
But wasn't it the Rays won in Game 5 on a walk-off homer? Did they say the home team, you always prefer to be the home team?
Yeah. You could say I prefer to be last, so I have the chance to tie it up or to take the lead, or I want to be first because I want to put the pressure.
Strategy too. Like
sure.
You see the same thing in college football when they do the overtime. The team defers and lets the other team go first.
Yeah, but I don't think it matters as much in baseball in terms of like we're going to try to win or lose games based on I think home field advantage matters more than batting last, because if you're down 8-0, it doesn't matter if you're batting last,
I'm
that sort of thing.
In a 5-game series where one game literally made the difference in the Yankees Rays, because I'll be honest with you, I thought the Yankees were more talented. If that series went to 7, I probably would have picked the Yankees, which is another thing in this COVID season that's different. Anywho, just throwing it out there.
For sure.
I think it's time for Drew's locks of the week, though. So last week, I guaranteed a 3-0 week. I went 2-1, and the only one I missed was the Kansas City Chiefs. And you know what? I'll take picking the best team in football to cover 11 points or 10 points, whatever it was. I'll take a loss. If it's going, the Chiefs are the ones that ruined my perfect week. I can live with that. I got the Raiders over the Chargers. It was like +1, almost a pick'em game. I think that was it +1 or +1.5. I might have still covered that if the Chargers got that last touchdown. Drew had the Chargers. He missed that one. We went head-to-head. I won that one. And 2-1 week. What is the other one I got? The Falcons over the Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
Drew was 1-2. He hit his English Premier League under 2.5. Did you see that it was a goalless draw, Drew?
Oh yeah, no goals, so scoreless. Oh yeah, easy winner.
Very well on that one, by the way.
Easy winner.
But you lost the Chargers and you lost something else. I had you at 1-2.
I was hoping you're the producer of this show. You're the scorekeeper. You should be writing this stuff down.
I did write it down, and I have it on my phone.
Yeah, I had the Broncos Falcons over under. I lost that one pretty big.
Pretty big. Tom Castleman finally had a winning week, his first winning week of the season.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm 4-4-1. Drew is 3-5-1, and Tom is 4-5.
I have no idea. You're the producer. You got to keep track of this.
I have it written down. I'm the only one who's 500. 4 wins, 4 losses, and a tie. Drew is 2 games under. Tom is now 1 game under. He had Arizona State covering against USC. 1-point ball game. UNC squeaks out the win. Talk about bad beats. Drew, do you remember what his pick was?
I don't.
Packers 49ers under 50 points. The
and
49ers score with 4 seconds to go. Then they make the extra point to get the 51 points. 4 seconds left in a meaningless game.
And I had great value because by game time it was down to 46.5 for the over-under. So I had great value. There were so many people out to injury and out with COVID, and it looked good early, and then it just kind of went like, okay, we're just going to play shell defense, take the win, get out of here. Yeah, that was a rough bad beat, but I'll live with it. I don't mind.
And you hit your presidential. You won your 9 cents. Tom tried to give you a parlay. You put like $100. You win 109 on the no dud. The Democrats win Illinois, California, and New York. I only let him count the win because he was in last place. I felt bad
It
for him.
was on Bovada. It fit all of the rules. Just like Drew picked the color tie that Joe Biden wore at a debate. It fit the rules. It was on Bovada. Found odds on it. It counts.
Yes, but my odds of that, they were like minus 170. Like there was a little bit of juice. Yours had a magnificent amount of juice.
I'm good with it. I don't even really know what that means.
It's like going to like a lemonade stand, and at one lemonade, like you pick the lemonade, you can get like 3 lemonades for like 30 cents, or you can get like 2 lemonades for like 25. I don't know what I'm talking about, but like
I don't know what you're talking about with lemonade. Basically, for Tom's bet, you would have had to bet $100 to win $9. For my Joe Biden bet, you would have had to bet $170. Or now I've confused myself. Sorry.
We're not math majors.
Well, for my bet, you had to bet 170 to win 100. For yours, I guess it was bet 100 to win 9. But you see,
yeah. No, I'm fully aware. I'm fully aware.
We were nice to you, Tom. We were nice to you. That we're counting that as a win. We're being very nice. This week.
Because I could say, because if I wanted to win, I'd just say, yeah, Bryson DeChambeau is going to make the cut. It's on Bovada. The odds are astronomical because he's likely going to. But you have to put the juice on it. So I guess it would make more sense if we had a allotted amount of money that we had, play money each week or pretend money. Sure. And you could bet with that. But anyway, let's just
I look at this segment more of a segment at picking like game lines. I look at it as a more fair thing. You guys are free to do as you wish. So, next time, if Tom picks one like that, we'll count it as half a win. All right, well, this week, this is what I got. 3-0 week coming. I promised it last week. I was close. I will promise it again this week. First and foremost, I will start with Dolphins -3 over the Chargers. I believe it might be 2.5. That line has moved a little bit. I think it's 3 now. I've seen it all sorts, but anywhere from that 2 to 4 point range, take the Dolphins. The Chargers are 3-15 the last 2 seasons in games decided by 1 score. When it comes down to the clutch, these guys simply do not deliver. Drew bet on them last week, and he lost because they can't deliver in the clutch. Tua looked very good for the Dolphins, 20 of 28, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, 35 rush yards. But at the end of the day, for Miami, it's all about that defense. Back-to-back games, they've scored a defensive touchdown. They also had a special teams touchdown a couple weeks ago. The Dolphins have won 4 games in a row. They're at home in this game. They just came off a big road game. Justin Herbert, as good as he's been, he's still a rookie quarterback. Look for him to make some mistakes against one of the top defenses in the NFL this week. Dolphins by a field goal, no problem. They might win this game by like 7 points. Take the Dolphins over the Chargers. Second bet, Giants +3 versus the Eagles. Last time out, New York lost by only 1 point at Philadelphia. They led that game 21-10 in the 4th quarter. The last few weeks, New York lost by 2 against Tampa Bay. They beat Washington. The last 5 games, the Giants have had last 5 games were Giants decided by 3 points or less. 2 of them wins, 3 of them losses. So the point is, New York, in recent weeks, they always keep it close or they win. So taking 3 points against an Eagles team, yes, I know they're coming off a bye week, but the Eagles aren't very good. I like the 3 points with the Giants. Lastly, Browns -2.5 over the Texans. You are what your record says you are. The Browns are a 5-3 football team. The Texans are 2-6. So I simply, and they've beaten the Jaguars, who, by the way, have 1 win, and that was week 1 of the season. So Houston hasn't beaten a team other than the Jaguars. So Browns by a field goal, No problem.
Drew,
What do
you
you
All
want
right,
to go with your
Castleman.
picks?
Sure, I'll go with mine. I do heavily disagree with that Browns pick, but that's not one of my locks of the week. Anyway,
Oh,
for
okay.
Drew's locks of the week, to the Masters we go. Xander Schauffele plus 120 to finish in the top 10. Book it. He finishes in the top 10. That's you bet 100 to win 120. Another Masters lock for you. Lucas Glover to miss the cut at minus 120. Bet $120 to win 100 on that one. And finally, Sunday afternoon, 49ers at Saints. Everybody's overreacting to the Saints game. I'll take the 49ers to cover 9.5.
Disagree on that one, by the way.
I know, because you overreacted to the Saints game of the century win.
Yes, I am definitely overreacting. Tom?
All right, so talking about over and under reactions, I don't believe that teams are cursed, and I don't think that correlation necessarily means causation. Each game is independent of itself. I'm going to take the Chargers to cover +3 on the road at Miami.
I love
Moving
it.
to the college ranks, I have Penn State. They came into the season ranked in the top 10. They have been disappointing, but I will lock them in to cover the -3 spread they have on Nebraska in Husker territory. And then I'll also take a flyer on the Masters as well at +210. I'll lock in Hideki Matsuyama for a top 10 finish at Augusta.
Wow!
Ooh,
Wow! A bit of a value bet there from
I
Tom
hope
Castleman.
so. I hope so.
So this-
I'm not familiar with like money lines and all that sort of thing. Like spreads and over unders is easy enough. I think +210 is a decent bet to make.
Yeah,
Or
so
does that mean it's
well,
a
yeah,
favorite,
because
or-
you bet 100, so
To win 100 and you win 210, is that right?
Okay.
yeah, you bet 100 to win 210.
Okay.
So it's the opposite of the minus. If it was minus 210, you'd have to bet $210
To get
to only win
100.
100. So there's a lot of juice on that.
Gotcha. Okay. That's what I'll lock in. I'll go for a value bet on that one, hopefully. I'm not going to be
I'm looking
watching to
forward
find
to
out.
it. I will be watching
You
the
are
Masters.
not. Oh my goodness.
Probably
I will be
not.
watching the Masters
see.
with significantly more interest this year than years past.
That's fair.
All of us are invested.
More ways
Bet-
than one.
Don't bet your mortgage on any of these picks, by the way.
I never bet my mortgage on anything.
Tom's
Except
moving into
on
a
the
house,
White
by
Sox.
the way. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no,
Yes.
that'll be December. So like we're starting the process of doing that. So yeah.
Speaking of houses, I will give a special salute your sports salute, since you guys like to do salutes before my statement of the week. Salute to Tom Castleman's dad is fixing my computer issues, and I'm currently using a replacement computer by him. And I've been working on the lighting. Finally, the light's coming in. The lighting's better. I've got this light over here. Look at this. Oh, yeah. I was so dark over there. So I was a little darker this week, but we're working on the lighting. I got to meet Tom's dog, childhood dog. Had never met him. So, yeah, getting my computer repaired by the master, Mr. Castleman himself. So salute to him. Saw your mom also, Tom, today, so that was great. Drew's just missing out. He didn't attend the Castleman wedding a couple years ago. He's never been blessed with meeting the Castleman.
Wow.
As I have.
Brings that one up.
It
So,
was
of course,
for
we're all
good
college
reason.
friends. For those who don't know, our college radio show, we did this together. But Tom and I are both in the Chicago area. Tom got married a couple years ago. Drew was not able to go to the wedding. Needless to say, the Castleman family is great. He has not had the
We
privilege
have our
to meet them
moments.
yet. What?
We have our moments.
Well, we all have our moments. That is definitely true. There are some moments where I just, get really upset at some of the things you guys say as well. So, we digress. Statement of the week time. I have a great one, but I'll let Drew start first.
Yeah, because mine will be short. My statement of the week this week,
Boring.
according to ESPN, new Chicago White Sox manager Tony La Russa was charged with a DUI that happened in February. Man, in this day and age, this shouldn't happen with a professional athlete or a coach or any manager of any sort. Yes, it's okay to grab a few drinks, but don't drive after. Call for a ride or a taxi or an Uber or a Lyft or whatever. You're a public figure. Tell the bartender that you need a ride. They can find somebody for you. I don't think money is a big issue for Tony La Russa, so pay $20 for a ride, then risk his life and others on the road.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you for bringing that
wasn't
up.
it like he was charged like the day before they signed him or the day after?
So
What was
okay,
it?
so the way the timing worked out is that he was arrested. I think it was like February, March. It was sometime earlier this year, and they didn't get around to booking the charges because they have a backlog with COVID. They have reduced staff and everything like that. So the charges were actually filed the day before that the White Sox hired him, and they knew about it, and they didn't care, and they don't care because it's the team owner, Jerry Reinsdorf. It's his call, basically. He is overriding, from what I'm hearing, he's overriding literally everybody in the front office, everybody else in the organization, and going with his guy. It is
Isn't there a whole story behind it where, like, because La Russa used to manage the White Sox and they let him go, and Reinsdorf didn't want to let him go? What's the whole story?
yes.
There's a whole
So
saga behind this.
yeah, so he managed, I believe it was from, I want to say 83 to 86. And then Ken Harrelson, longtime just baseball man, color
Hawk
commentator for the
Harrelson.
White Sox. Hawk Harrelson was the
Bingo!
general manager, fired Tony La Russa. Jerry Reinsdorf, typically, like we saw this in The Last Dance, stands behind his front office people, lets them do their job. He let Hawk Harrelson do that. Of course, Tony La Russa goes on to Oakland, goes on to St. Louis to win a lot of baseball games, win some World Series, also have a lot of steroids. So if you want to talk about, AJ Hinch, Alex Cora cheating, so did Tony La Russa. And basically, the White Sox had an entire process in mind. They've been rebuilding for 5 years. The team is finally fun to watch. It's really exciting. And now I feel like, at least for me personally, it was dicey enough with COVID next year in terms of like, okay, when can we like safely go to games? I don't even necessarily know if I want to, because I don't want to be putting any more money into that man's pocket than I have to for Jerry Reinsdorf. It's an incredibly disappointing move on his part to override his front office like that, to take away their power and their stability like that so publicly. And I mean, especially like Drew, you were saying, like, you should never drink and drive, but especially now when we have ride sharing. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the comments. Like, he's saying to the officer, like, hey, do you know who I am? You want to see my World Series ring? I'm a Hall of Fame baseball guy, brother. It's like, that is the most pathetic thing when you go to the do you know who I am card. And it's not like he was pulled over for like reckless driving in '07 when he got arrested for a DUI. He was asleep at the wheel at a stoplight. This time crashed his car into a curb. Thank goodness it wasn't somebody.
Well, and how old is he? He's like
He's
80.
76.
He's almost 80, so you think he should know better, and based on past experience.
Yeah.
Real quick,
And in
AJ
07,
Hinch,
he said
is that the guy the White Sox should have gotten, Tom?
AJ Hinch, Sandy Alomar. If you want to go with the retired manager route, Bruce Bochy. All these guys are much better options with far less baggage. Yeah, sure. Why not? Reach out to him. I'm sure they can find a hat his size.
Yeah, I like it. That would have been a great hire. I like it.
Sure. Literally anybody but Tony La Russa. Literally 29 other teams weren't going to be offering him this job, and the only reason he has this one is because he's great buddies with Jerry Reinsdorf. There's a whole lot of other stuff behind this that I don't want to get into because I want to be mindful of your guys' time with the show and your statements as well.
All right, well, what's your statement?
So I have two salutes to get to really quickly. First, today is Veterans Day, so a literal salute to the men and women in our armed forces. We cannot thank you enough for all that you do to protect the freedoms that we have, including that of public discourse and disagreements, which we bring to sports. Other people choose to bring it to greater levels of different forums, but a definite salute to you on this day. And then also, as you guys know, Alex Trebek is the longtime host of my favorite game show, Jeopardy, passed away at the age of 80 over this past weekend after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. A salute to a man who, by all accounts, is just a great person, an absolute mensch. So a salute to him as well. For my statement, we're going to stick with baseball 2 weeks in a row. No sport seems more hell-bent on making itself obsolete than baseball. In the midst of a riveting World Series, Commissioner Rob Manfred took to the media to talk about loss of revenue this year and the potential loss of revenue for next year, or rather the forecasted loss of revenue for next year. Never too early to tamp down expectations on your offseason. Stay frosty, cold stove. In a move that even left the sticks to sports crowd scratching their monotracked minds, baseball's next brilliant marketing move was to announce Gold Glove winners on election night, and one with record turnout to boot. It's time to face facts. Baseball, or rather football, is the national pastime, and the NBA has been forward-thinking in its social media presence and how to help grow the tent and expand fan viewership to a younger and more diverse audience. My statement of the week is this. With several larger issues on the horizon regarding the viability of its product beyond regional interest, the last thing baseball needs to be doing is shooting itself in the foot. There are any number of ways the sport can better position itself to its fans and casual sports observers. Host award ceremonies in the day off before the wild card round. Most MVP, Cy Young, Rookie, and Manager of the Year awards don't come down to the wire, and they don't need to be coming 2 weeks after the World Series is over. Get a memo to the baseball police. No more unwritten crap in the game. If you don't like somebody bat flipping a grand slam on a 3-0 count when they're in a blowout game, make a bad pitch. There are so many talented, energetic players in the game today. Find a way to showcase them and then get out the damn way.
Yeah, completely agree. I think marketing is terrible in baseball. I think the name recognition is one of the things that, we talk about some of the best players. I'll be honest with you. I don't know what Shane Bieber looks like. If I saw Shane Bieber down the street, the best pitcher in baseball this last year, I wouldn't know what he looked like.
Mm-hmm.
I think baseball has done a horrible job of marketing its stars. It's something the NBA is very good at in terms of, they have face and name recognition. And baseball, interestingly enough, had the opportunity to be the first sport to start. And actually, they started right around the same time as basketball. I think maybe barely, but they were positioned to start much earlier, grab the spotlight, grab the ratings, kind of grab the popularity. And there was a whole big holdup with the owners and the players, and it was all about money.
It was all about money. It was mostly the owners' fault.
Yeah, well, they wanted their money. So anywho, I agree with you. I think baseball as a league, Rob Manfred as a commissioner, is not doing his job well.
Nope.
I think football is always going to be king in America. Nothing is going to change that. But you look at Adam Silver and the NBA certainly doing a significantly better job than the baseball commissioner, Rob Manfred. My statement of the week. Again, Tom, be careful here. I don't misconstrue this to think that I'm saying it doesn't matter. However, coaching in sports is overrated. The coach gets too much credit when things go well and too much blame when things go poorly. A perfect example of that is Bill Belichick. It's about getting yourself talented players, and that's the most important thing that it takes to win. Bill Belichick in 2018, under 2 years ago, won the Super Bowl. He didn't all of a sudden become a much worse coach in the span of a year and a half. Yes, there are certain situations and times when, the game calls for changes and, some coaches don't adapt. But in the last year and a half, Bill Belichick has not changed significantly as a coach. And he went from winning the Super Bowl to a team that's 3-5, needing a last-second field goal to beat the Jets, who haven't won a game. So it's about getting yourself players. And I know you're big into finances. When you're financing a team, focus more on paying the players more, maybe paying the coach a little bit less, and put greater importance on your talent. We're seeing this across all sports. Greg Popovich one of the all-time great coaches, considered by many a top 3 basketball coach of all time. Pretty safe to say. 22 years in a row, the Spurs made the playoffs with him. They were a championship contender just a few years ago. What happened? Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, all those, Kawhi Leonard, all those guys left the team. All of a sudden, they made the playoffs for the first time in 22 years. Popovich didn't all of a sudden become a significantly worse coach. He lost his talent. What happened to Steve Kerr with the Warriors? They had the best record of all time a few years ago. A lot of guys got hurt. All of a sudden, they had the worst record in the league. Frank Vogel, he's a good coach. Tyronn Lue, they're good coaches. But those are not top 5 coaches, maybe not even top 10 coaches in the NBA. They had LeBron James. He won them a championship. We have Pep Guardiola in soccer, one of my favorite coaches. He was winning the Champions League title with Barcelona all those years. He leaves Barcelona. He goes to Bayern Munich and Man City. Great teams, great players, but not quite good enough to win. He didn't win the championships with those teams, the European Cups, because he didn't have the same talent he had in Barcelona. You know, we had Bill Belichick and Nick Saban coach together on the Browns. Yes, it was the 90s. Yes, they were young, but you had 2 of the all-time great football minds coaching together, and their team was not a contender. They didn't go anywhere in Cleveland in the early 90s. That team in the 80s might have played the century of the game, but that team with Bill Belichick didn't play that well. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but we see all these situations now in the modern day culture where all of a sudden a team does great and they start applauding the coach, or we see a team do not so well and we fire the coach right away. Let's blame the coach. Let's scapegoat him. Coaching matters more in college football because you need a big name for recruiting, but specifically in professional sports, the players you have are much more important than your coach. Get yourself great players. Don't focus so much on the coach, and realize that you need the coach to make it all work. I'm saying it doesn't matter, but the players are more important than the coach.
Well, yeah, they're the ones who play the game.
Exactly.
So you guys agree?
Yeah.
Wow. Good. Well, I think one of the things that really bothers me, though, that we see in modern day sports is how quickly teams fire coaches. And I think specifically, I think of college football, where they sign these coaches to 3-4 year deals, and 2 years in, they buy them out. Like Mizzou had to buy out Barry Odom for $1 million. Like, sign your coach to less, smaller contracts, but don't always be quick to, like, get rid of the coach. Like, I feel like coaches get scapegoated for everything. And on the other hand, when things do go well, they're like, oh, well, the coach is the one that made the difference. And he did to an extent. I mean, winning a championship is a team effort. Every little bit matters. But it's a proven track record. You put great players on the court, they're going to be the ones who are going to win you the games. It's not going to be so much the coach.
Oh, for sure. I think it's just that, like, coaches, I think, do get too much blame and too much credit. But it's easier to fire a coach than it is to fire all the players. Like, that's part of it. It's also partly the off-field stuff, like culture. You look at Greg Popovich, part of the reason why the Spurs were so good is because he was able to get a generational talent like Tim Duncan. And then, not saying that Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker aren't great players, but, like, certainly if you're saying, like, who are some of, like, the top 5, top 10 players of all time, like, Parker and Ginobili aren't making that list. It's finding a way to take good talent and accentuate it and get them to buy into a system where, it's not all about me. So they get too much blame, I think, for the in-game stuff. If a player, misses a shot, makes a bad pitch, throws a bad ball, it's not the coach's fault.
That's just failure to execute,
right,
on the player's part.
Right.
But you could also argue, well, they didn't practice it in practice enough.
That too. Like, if you look at one of those interceptions Tom Brady threw on Sunday, it was because Antonio Brown ran a completely different route. Like, that's obviously on the player. It's also a little bit on the coaching for not drilling that in well enough.
Well, he's been there for like a week, though.
Well, I know, but then, like, it's also part of coaching to not put him on the field if you're not confident that he can run the proper routes. I'm not
he
saying,
might
like,
have had like the most catches of the whole roster in that
I'm
game.
not saying that, like, Bruce Arians obviously, like, should face any, like, ramifications. I'm just saying, like,
Sure.
that's like a small example of how coaching can matter, not on game day, but also on game day, if that makes sense. So no, I agree with you completely. It obviously comes down to talent because they're the ones that win, or they're the ones that play the game. It's just like there's a big glob, I think, in the middle of every sports league of coaches, managers, whatever. And there's like one or two guys that like can make an actual tangible difference. And there's like a couple guys to the positive and then the same thing to the negative. But yeah, it's obviously all about the players.
Yeah, and I think of LeBron James, a guy who's won with so many different coaches, and his game, all of us, he's pretty much the same player he was when he entered the league. He's the same LeBron James. I mean, he may pass the ball a little bit more now. He may not play defense as locked down because he's older, but Jordan did the same thing late in his career. He may shoot a little more threes with the analytics, but LeBron James is pretty much the same player no matter who his coach has been after all these years. Well, guys, another successful week of Salute Your Sports.
Yeah.
This might be our shortest show yet. So how about that?
Keep track of the time.
Yeah. We'll be back next week. I have a really good statement of the week next week. I already have pre-planned it. So,
wow.
So I was debating which way to go actually with it. So I'll tease that. We'll actually talk a little NBA basketball, the NBA draft coming up. We'll have a recap of our locks of the week and plenty more talk every week. Salute Your Sports. Have a great day, everyone.
Be well.